You're about to hear from two of the people who fought the federal travel mask mandate and won. But because of the topic, we can't put the whole conversation here on YouTube because of YouTube's community guidelines. So if you want to see the rest of it, go to one of my other platforms. The links are in the description. The best place to go is AllisonMorrow.locals.com, where you'll get exclusive content. Plus, you can be part of my editorial board. We have editorial board meetings once a week, and you can give me feedback from the week before, or you can give story ideas for the week ahead. Whatever you do, do not stay here on YouTube. If you want to know the full truth about what's going on around us, you got to go somewhere else. I'm here with two of the people who fought the federal mask mandate, travel mandate, and won. And we'll see what happens in the future. But why don't we start with the two of you all? Just introduce yourselves, who you are, and I guess if included in your intro, you could say why you wanted to take on this case. Why was it unique or interesting to you?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us, Allison. It's great to be with you. I'm the president and founder of Health Freedom Defense Fund, and we are the nonprofit that is behind the travel mask mandate lawsuit. We also have a bunch of other lawsuits against the COVID jab mandates that are occurring across the country. Two of those are against the federal government, and then one against the Los Angeles Unified School District and elsewhere. But I started Health Freedom Defense Fund because I've been active in the health freedom community for many, many years. I made a documentary, an award-winning documentary on vaccines many years ago, and it helped me appreciate the importance of laws and rights that protect our bodily autonomy. And when 2020 unfolded, it was very clear to me that we were headed in a direction that was not going to be in the direction of freedom and liberty, and that we needed to step up. And so that's why I started Health Freedom Defense Fund. And then when we were watching all of the measures unfold, one of those was the mask mandate. And the mask mandate we find particularly of particular concern because it's kind of the thin end of the wedge, if you've ever heard that saying, or the tip of the spear, in that if they can force us all to wear masks, what else can they do? And, you know, the federal government doesn't really have the power and authority to intrude into our individual liberties like that. And so we thought that it was a really important mandate to push back upon. And that's why we undertook it.
Okay, Brent, go ahead.
Well, I am, as Leslie mentioned earlier while we were off the air, I'm the lead attorney in the mask case. I represent Health Freedom Defense Fund in that and in other matters. What attracted me to this case and the topic of health freedom in general during COVID is that our government, especially the federal government, is a government of limited and enumerated powers. And I've been very concerned over the years about the growing power of the administrative state. And this was a classic example of the administrative state basically stepping out and doing something that it lacked the statutory authority to do on the orders of the President of the United States, who had made a political promise to, as the colloquial expression, to do something about the COVID pandemic. And he had promised to institute some sort of national mask mandate. It was clear to me at the time that anything like that would be unconstitutional or at the very minimum extra legal. And I just saw it. In fact, I just saw a comment in the press from Robert Redfield, the CDC director under President Trump, who said CDC had concluded that it didn't have the statutory authority to do what the CDC did under Biden in terms of this travel mask mandate. And so my good friend and colleague George Wentz of the Davalier Law Group brought me on board to help with this and other matters representing Health Freedom Defense Fund. And this was one of the cases that we launched last year.
When you're saying that there are prior administrations that said, hey, we did not have the legal authority to do this, but in response to the lawsuit that you guys just won, now the CDC has said to the DOJ, appeal this, and they have. So they still believe that they do have the legal right, I'm assuming. What do you make of that?
It's an interesting predicament that CDC finds itself in. You know, there is a saying that when you attack Moscow, you put Berlin at risk. The CDC, by overstepping, really put its institutional authority at risk and really compromised itself terribly. in this matter. And what they're hoping to do is to claw back what they believed to be their statutory authority to do this or things like this in the future. I would just note one thing that's interesting about the fact that they've appealed is they did not ask the appellate court for a stay of Judge Meisel's order vacating the mask mandate. In other words, they were happy to leave her order in place for the time being. Their concern appears more to be for the long term of, well, what would our authority be if we want to do this in the future? And that's what
Mhm.
this appeal is really about.
Leslie, do you have any thoughts on that before I ask my other question?
Well, I think what Brant mentioned about the administrative state is a really important point that we need to hammer home, and that is that, you know, our government is supposed to be of, by, and for the people, and we're supposed to have three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. And all of these federal agencies now fall under the executive branch, and these agencies were never envisioned originally by our founding fathers, and it's sort of become this fourth branch of government. And it's a real problem because they're not elected and they're not accountable to anybody, no, not to the electorate. And that's a problem. So we have people who aren't accountable to us making decisions for us. And historically, the CDC is supposed to make recommendations, and that's what they do. They make recommended vaccination schedule, for instance, and the states then decide whether or not to adopt any of those recommendations into their state laws. And yet so that's kind of been their historical self-awareness, right? That's where they're supposed to be, in this recommending kind of advisory role. And it's really crept now to this place now where they're trying to intrude into the individual liberties and lives of individual Americans. And I think that Americans should be very concerned about that because we don't have any say about it, right? We've heard so much talk about a deep state in the last couple of years, and this is what we mean, essentially. These are major problems when people who have no accountability to the electorate are making decisions for them. Then we've strayed very, very far from the ideals of our founding fathers, and I think it's incumbent upon every American to want to rectify that. And so I think we should be celebrating what Judge Mizell did because it was a bit of a blow to the administrative state. And I think that is, in effect, a strike for freedom. And that's a great thing.
Before we get to how she made her decision, let's talk about the case, because I'm guessing it centers on a lot of the stuff you just talked about. Can you talk a little bit about the case you made, and did it include at all whether masks work? Or was it more focused on what you're talking about, the authority of the government to make decisions about it at all? Even if it works or doesn't work was perhaps a moot point if it's an overstep of government over, power, I guess. So just tell me a little bit about the case you made.
Sure. We didn't take up a direct challenge to the issue of whether masks work because that raises what we call in the law a fact issue. And fact issues generally have to be resolved by jury trials. And that, basically going down that route would vastly expand the scope of time needed to get a resolution. And so we took a legal approach, which is a remedy provided under the Federal Administrative Procedure Act. You can challenge administrative action on a number of grounds. The first ground that we challenged the mask mandate on was that the CDC had exceeded its statutory authority to make rules. The second was that the CDC had failed to provide notice of a proposed rule and allow for comment, as agencies are generally required to do under the Administrative Procedure Act, and it failed to show just cause for bypassing notice and comment. And we also argued that the rule itself was arbitrary and capricious in that the CDC had, one, failed to adhere to its own internal rules when promulgating this order, but that it also had failed to adequately and reasonably explain itself in terms of why it did what it did and the lines it drew and so forth. And we also raised an alternative argument which the court did not address, which is that if the statute that CDC relied on is in fact as broad as CDC claims it is, then that would constitute an unconstitutional delegation of legislative authority by Congress, and the statute itself would have to be held as invalid. And the judge, basically, she agreed with the first 3 points. Basically, she concluded first that the CDC lacked the statutory authority that it relied on in the statute it relied on when promulgating this rule, that it had failed to allow notice and comment and failed to show just cause for not providing for notice and comment, and that the rule itself was arbitrary and capricious.
If you're reading through thousands of documents in order to sue the federal government, you need a great pair of glasses. And that's why you should go to betterspectacles.com/Allison, especially if you wear progressive lenses. That's their specialty. And my husband wears them with a very difficult prescription. They have significantly improved his migraines. He gets migraines because of traumatic brain injury. He wears these glasses and they have really helped him. So if you wear progressive lenses, go to betterspectacles.com/Allison, get 61% off of the glasses. But also, if you wear blue light blocking technology, blue light blocking glasses, especially if you're watching my videos, sorry, but you are getting assaulted by blue light. It's inflammatory for the brain. You should definitely get a blue light set of glasses that work, and most of them are total crap. You can get them at betterspectacles.com/Allison and support my work while you're at it. Remember, the only time you can take your mask off while flying used to be when you were eating or drinking. So what better way to support free speech and my work than going to AllisonWinePromo.com. Get 50% off of my favorite wines and 50% off shipping. 2 of the bottles in the trio you'll get come from almost 9,000 feet. These are extreme altitude Malbecs, and because of the altitude, they use fewer pesticides, and also the grapes work really hard under the sun. These are from very remote locations, so the taste is very unique. And also, one of them comes from the oldest vineyard in Argentina. Another one uses natural fermentation. So get yourself some high altitude Malbec from Argentina, support my work, and let's continue on with this video. What about the people who are freaking out? Because I go on Twitter, I see these 2 alternate universes that I feel like people are living in and have been living in at least for the last, I don't know, half a dozen years. Just increasingly more and more feels like we're completely dichotomized in separate worlds, and thinking completely differently. And so I saw a lot of people that were like, I'm going to drive, I'm not flying anymore. And doctors, doctors were saying that, and regular people were saying that. And then you'd see doctors and regular people saying, finally, I can fly again. I don't have to drive anymore because I wasn't going to fly if I had to wear a mask. And so what do you make of that reaction of the people who weren't excited about it, who felt like this case is now putting them and their kids, their elderly parents at risk? And what's the reaction been towards you from that side?
Well, we've received more than our fair share of whackadoodles sending us all sorts of really inappropriate messages and materials and photographs and images. It's really horrible. But I think that maybe 25% of the public wishes the mandate stayed. I mean, that's my guess based on what I'm hearing from friends who've traveled recently. The initial images that we saw, photographs and videos, were that maybe 2 or 3 people were on airplanes still. If you saw a 100-passenger airplane, there would be 2 or 3 people in a mask. And now that's bounced to maybe a quarter or a third. But I think the vast majority of Americans are over this and want to get back to some semblance of normal. And they don't believe that there's any more risk in flying where they have advanced filtration systems on the aircraft. And the airlines themselves are saying that it's, one of the safest places to be. But you can sit in a restaurant in the airport, but if you're 5 feet away and you're ordering, you have to have a mask. So you sit maskless and eat, but if you're ordering, you have to have a mask on. If you are, it just doesn't add up, right? You go on the airplane and you can take your mask down while you eat, and that doesn't stop the spread of anything. And if you are not eating, then you have to have your mask on. Let's be really clear. Health Freedom Defense Fund stands for freedom. It stands for choice. We are not opposed to people making their own decisions. And if somebody feels that, if they believe that masks work, and if it gives them more comfort, and they believe that it protects them, and they want to wear one, they can wear one. They can wear 3. They can make their own choices. We are not opposed to any individual making their own healthcare choices. We stand in defense of that, whether we agree with it or not. That's our point, and that's our objective.
Okay, so I'm over on my locals community, and AllisonMorrow.locals.com. If you're watching this somewhere else, go become part of my community over there, and then you can submit questions for people. This was what I wanted to ask you first. Do you feel the process to challenge unconstitutional, lawless rules is difficult by design? If yes, do you feel certain people feel emboldened to make up unconstitutional, lawless rules because of this?
That's a great question, and it really goes to the heart of the dispute that's sort of the subtext of this case, which is going back to the Roosevelt administration, which established the modern administrative state. How much power should the executive branch have to essentially create rules, create laws that govern our conduct? The Congress's power falls under Article 1 of the Constitution for a reason, because the framers of the Constitution saw that as the most important power. However, since the Roosevelt administration, the courts have developed and Congress has developed a very arcane system of laws and rules that can make it difficult to persuade a court to overcome an agency determination of what rules should be. And this goes to the heart of a dispute that is going to be ongoing in the courts, and especially in the Supreme Court. How much power can Congress give the executive branch when it passes a law and says, okay, can it just say, well, these are the general principles and we leave it up to the executive branch to decide how to carry it out? Or does Congress need to be more specific in what it wants? And, sort of the other side of that coin is the administrative state, by exercising excessive authority, letting Congress off the hook from what is the one job that it is supposed to be doing, which is legislating. And Congress, of course, has an incentive to avoid legislating because it doesn't want to be on the hook for this. You could try to get Congress to pass a mask mandate today, and I doubt you could round up a majority of votes, at least not in the Senate, if perhaps not the House. And so, I think part of the battle here is to hold Congress's feet to the fire and put the legislative responsibilities of government back where it belongs.
Leslie.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
So whether or not it's by design, the reality of the situation is that the system is stacked in the direction of the government. And the way that the law works, the way that the system works is it's incredibly difficult for the individual to challenge anything legally. And I believe that our system's actually inverted in some ways from the way that it should be. So first of all, these lawsuits are extremely costly. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. It can be $50,000 to $70,000 just to file one of these cases, let alone pursue it over a year or 2 years and go to discovery and all these things. We're talking, some cases can be in the millions, okay? That precludes the vast majority of Americans from engaging in any kind of litigation because most only have a few $100s saved. They're living paycheck to paycheck. There's no way they can contemplate pursuing something, even when their rights are grossly infringed. So the second piece of it is that I said that our system is inverted, and I really truly believe that, because what happens is CDC issues this directive and everybody has to comply with it. And then the onus is on us to raise the money, marshal attorneys, put together a Loctite lawsuit and fight back. How many people have the resources or the ability to do that? It shouldn't be that way, in my opinion. It should be that there's some independent body that reviews every kind of anything that emanates from a governmental authority that says, yes, this is constitutional, or no, it's not, before it's enacted. To me, that seems like a good solution, because I think we have a real problem here that this is happening, and the little guy, the average person, doesn't have any power to challenge.
If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. You need a good cup of coffee. So go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, get some USDA certified organic high altitude Nicaraguan roast. They have light roast and dark roast, and also have a tea. If you're a tea drinker, they've got a Caturra tea, which is tea made out of the fruit that's around the coffee bean. It's a great company. They really help support my work, and the founder and CEO of this small family-run company lives right there in Nicaragua, where they grow, harvest, and roast the beans. So again, get a cup of coffee. Thanks for watching the entire video. Thanks for supporting my work, and I will see you next time.